Hello and welcome to The Last Word. As more and more details of the Robert Vadra story emerge, we ask, do we have a potential smoking gun? Or could this be a case of smoke without fire? That's with the Associate Editor of the Business Standard, Mihir Sharma, the Opinion Editor of the Financial Express, Sunil Jain, and the Editor of FirstPost.com, R. Jagannathan. Mihir Bose, let's start with the front page expose in your paper, The Business Standard, this morning, where you reveal that in 2007-2008, Corporation Bank, a PSU, gave an overdraft of 7.94 crore to Vadra's Skylight Hospitality, a company which at that time had total resources of just 1 lakh. And as your story reveals, in a very real sense, this overdraft turned out to be the trigger that helped Vadra amass a fortune in real estate. Now, for the benefit of those who haven't read your paper, why is this overdraft unusual and surprising?
Well, I can't imagine very many banks, particularly very many public sector banks, would be willing to lend for a real estate venture, which is inherently risky, an amount of money that is essentially 8,000 times the amount that the promoter has put in. So you have a debt equity ratio here that is extremely unusual, taken in isolation at least. It is possible, of course, that when not seen in isolation, when you look at maybe Mr. Vadra's association with that particular branch, because that is right next to his head office, or the head office of his export company, which he had been running for some time, maybe then it's not so unusual. But definitely that single transaction is something you shouldn't see a public sector bank doing.
Sunil Jain, the first question that arises is, would Corporation Bank have given a 7.94 crore overdraft to a company with just 1 lakh total resources if the owner and director wasn't Sonia Gandhi's son-in-law?
Karan, I'd love to say that it would never happen had Robert Vadra not been Sonia Gandhi's son-in-law. But let's also keep in mind that all these banks, all public sector banks, have given a hell of a sweetheart deal to Vijay Mallya and Kingfisher, so they have been known to give these kind of sweetheart deals. But I think the larger point is true that Robert Vadra got the money because he was who he was. I think the fact that DLF gave them the loan, the advance, was because he was who he was. I think there's little doubt about that.
All right, I accept the point you make. All I'll add for the sake of the audience is that Vijay Mallya does have a track record with United Breweries, even if Kingfisher seems to suggest he's beginning to spoil it. That track record didn't exist in the case of Robert Vadra. Mr. Jagannathan, the second question is that the overdraft was used to pay for the first installment of a 3.5-acre purchase of land in Manesar. Now, the Business Standard comments, it would be unusual for any public sector bank to fund virtually the entire value of a big-ticket land purchase. Would you agree that this is unprecedented and therefore potentially questionable?
Yes. In fact, all the numbers that we get from the balance sheets are very, very questionable. I mean, you're showing a purchase in the same year at a cost of about 15 or 16 crores. And then by the end of the year, I think you raise an advance of 50 crores. And then in the same year, DLF says they also got the property.
Can I stop you, Mr. Jagannathan? I'm not talking about the balance sheets. Yeah. I'm talking about, is it questionable that a public sector bank would give, in fact, a loan or an overdraft that virtually covers an entire big-ticket land purchase? Would you accept that use of the overdraft, which obviously is something Corporation Bank would have known about, is questionable because public sector banks usually don't get into land deals?
Yes, I think actually I'm not surprised that public sector banks do this, because only public sector banks are vulnerable to huge political pressures. So certainly it is questionable, but these kind of activities happen only and largely with public sector banks.
So you're also suggesting that there could have been an element of political pressure that cajoled Corporation Bank. Am I correct in that interpretation?
Yes.
Did you say?
I mean, I think there must have been some element. Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, Mihir Sharma, your paper does point out that the money was returned to Corporation Bank in a year, possibly even in less time than that. So clearly, Robert Vadra was a good risk. I assume this means that it wasn't criminally wrong to give him an overdraft, but could it be the case, as we're all suggesting, that Vadra exploited his proximity to Sonia Gandhi, and that if he didn't have that proximity and that connection, he wouldn't have got such a sizable overdraft, and therefore even if there isn't any criminal liability, this is a case of financial impropriety?
Impropriety is a tough word to use here, but definitely it has the appearance of impropriety. Corporation Bank does have questions to answer. Would they have given this money to anybody else? Would they have given this deal to anybody else? In this case, they were lucky. In other cases, for example, in the case of Kingfisher, public sector banks have not been so lucky in lending to connected people.
So over here, even though you can't say with certainty this is improper, it has the appearance of impropriety.
Absolutely.
Sunil, of course, what happened thereafter is equally important. Business Standard shows that shortly after Robert Vadra acquired the 3.5 acres in Manesar, in fact, in months thereafter, the Haryana government gave permission for the land to be used for commercial purposes. This not only was done very speedily, but it also dramatically changed by upping the value of the land. Now, do you believe that once again this was a special favor granted to Mr. Vadra by the Haryana government because of who he is, or is that an unfair imputation?
Well, the interesting thing, Karan, is that of all the allegations that the Haryana government sought to, to counter yesterday, this is an argument they never raised at all. So I think in this whole case, what we get is all the allegations that Mr. Kejriwal has made. As long as he was talking about just a deal between Robert Vadra and DLF, you could still argue they were private individuals, which is actually what the government has said. I think what makes this whole case interesting is the fact that what Kejriwal is suggesting is that Robert Vadra and DLF had a link, and that link is what made the Haryana government help DLF. I think that's the critical thing which needs to be probed. I think nobody's got an answer to that. They have been, Kejriwal has got a few things wrong, there's no doubt.
But hang on, I'm stopping you. Can I stop you? This is not a Kejriwal allegation. This is something that the Business Standard has discovered and revealed. And they've revealed, and I'm just repeating it quickly, that literally within months of Robert Vadra buying the Manesar land, the Haryana government gave permission for it to be used for commercial purposes. And I'm asking you, do you believe that the speed with which that happened suggests a favor being done to Vadra by the Haryana government?
Yeah, I've never seen permissions coming so quickly before.
So this is clearly therefore another sign or proof of favor. Am I right?
Yeah, it would look so. It would look so, certainly.
Mr. Jagannathan, almost immediately after permission was given by the Haryana government for commercial use, DLF stepped in and bought the land. Now, whereas Robert Vadra had bought those 3.5 acres for 15.38 crore, DLF paid him, just a year later, a price that was 377% more, that is to say 58 crore. And secondly, they advanced 50 crore of that, which is to say 86% of the purchase price, almost immediately. Now, do you accept that because the land had use for commercial purposes, its value had really jumped from 15 crore to 58? Or once again is this sign of someone doing Robert Vadra a favor?
I think the sequence of events suggests that there was some connection between the timing of the purchase by Mr. Vadra and the loan that comes from DLF, on the assumption that that something might happen with the change in the use of the land, and also the value that might happen. Don't forget another thing. When the money is there with you, a large advance is there with you, you earn a lot through interest. So your capital keeps accumulating even though you are doing nothing with the land.
Absolutely.
So there are sweetheart angles in all these things.
But what about the fact that the value given for this land by DLF is 377% more than what Mr. Vadra paid for it just a year earlier? Do you believe that that land price had increased by so much simply because permission for commercial use had been granted, or do you think DLF was overpaying?
No, I think, well, you can't say, because when land use requirements are changed, obviously the value goes up. But whether it would have gone up by 4 times, and somebody could not have made that kind of connection unless you knew that it was going to be changed, and that's where the thing needs to be probed,
Okay. Now, Meher Sharma, the conclusion your paper comes to is this, and I'm going to read it out. Three crucial decisions gave Mr. Vadra a flying start in his real estate foray. The generous overdraft from Corporation Bank, the timely approval from the Haryana government for commercial development of his land, and DLF's decision to buy it at an enhanced value and to advance him most of the purchase price for an extended period. Does all of that add up to simply good luck, or is it a case of people helping Sonia Gandhi's son-in-law? And if it is the second, then does it amount to criminality or impropriety, or possibly neither?
Well, Karan, I think you and your viewers know that in India, it's the powerful that are lucky. And so it's very difficult to tell the question of connectedness and luck apart. And I don't think we can even go there. But definitely it is the case that if somebody knew in advance that land would have its use changed and pass that information on, that information is worth something and they should not have been talking about it. If it is the case that he got that land the use of that land changed through some form of pressure, then that is an impropriety, and that's something that needs to be probed. The other two things, it's not clear at all.
When I asked you earlier simply about the fact that Corporation Bank had given a 7.94 crore overdraft to a company with just 1 lakh resources, you said it had the appearance of impropriety. Now when you add to that the two next stages, the fact that speedy permission for commercial use was given by the Haryana government, and thereafter DLF stepped in and bought the land almost immediately for a price that is at least 377% more than what Vadra paid for it. Would you say those two stages also have the appearance of impropriety?
They do. But such is the foundation of a great many of our great fortunes in this country.
All right, that may be true of many people's fortunes. Impropriety, therefore, is a phrase that you can apply to other people as well. But in this instance, it does appear to apply to Vadra.
Yes.
Very quickly, Sunil Jain, could all of this then add up to some sort of potential smoking gun?
I don't know, Karan, to be honest, they've been far bigger scams that we've had, whether you're talking about 2G or CWG or coal. And frankly, there hasn't been, anything which is, no government has fallen. So I'd be very surprised if this worked out, this turned out to be anything much bigger than, than
there's no doubt that 2G and CWG and perhaps Colgate are bigger scams, but I'm not comparing the size of the scams, nor am I really, Mr. Jagannathan, talking about whether this particular one, if it is a scam, will bring the government down. I'm simply asking a question. Does the three sequences that we've talked about, which Business Standard highlighted on their front page today, have the appearance of a potential smoking gun? Sunil Jain possibly thinks not. What's your answer?
Very clearly it is so, because in the whole real estate business, which stinks of very strong politician, builder and businessman nexus, this is the way money is transferred from one to the other, where loans are made at low rates, and then property prices go up, and then the politician exists. Most of the investors in big real estate projects, the hidden investors are often politicians or builders or criminal elements. So this the Vadra case runs very parallel to that, and so one cannot presume that there is nothing wrong with it. Moreover, one does not set up half a dozen companies or 10 companies to do these kind of things if you are clearly a small businessman trying to do one small business. So one needs to look at it very closely, and it has all the elements of something that does not smell right.
All right, we have a split verdict. Sunil Jain reluctant to want to say we have the elements here of a smoking gun, but R. Jagannathan seems to have no doubt. A smoking gun, it certainly is for him. Let's take a break and come back and look at the second case that some believe is a smoking gun. Does it stand up to verification, or does it collapse when you examine it closely? That's in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to The Last Word. We're asking, do we have a smoking gun in the Robert Vadra case? Meher Bose, the second potential smoking gun lies hidden in what I call the details and chronology of what Arvind Kejriwal revealed yesterday. Shortly after the Haryana government permitted DLF to use land it had bought from East India Hotels for an SEZ, Robert Vadra acquired a 50% stake in an SEZ company floated by DLF for a sum of just 2.5 lakhs. Now, are the two events in any way connected? And secondly, do you get the feeling that Vadra only got his shareholding in return for help in getting the land use changed?
I don't see any connection being necessary between the two. DLF and the Haryana government under several successive administrations have had a very close, almost symbiotic relationship. They can pretty much get whatever they want done. In fact, in the judgment that Mr. Kejriwal held up in the course of his press conference where he made this point yesterday, the Punjab and Haryana High Court makes the same point. It is absolutely unnecessary for there to be any connection between Mr. Vadra buying into a company 2 years later in 2008, in end 2008, and DLF getting permission from the Haryana government in 2006.
2006 and March 2007. So there's an 18-month gap.
I don't see, it's a very, very far-fetched thing, but Mr. Kejriwal specializes in those.
So in this instance, you think that Mr. Kejriwal is over-interpreting?
Absolutely.
Let me put that to you, Mr. Jagannathan. Are there, if you set aside the fact that Robert Vadra is Sonia Gandhi's son-in-law, are there other reasons, good reasons, why DLF might want to make him a 50% partner in an SEZ company?
Yeah, actually the SEZ one is the one where I find the link is weakest between Vadra connection and what DLF wanted to do. Because I think DLF has been in Gurgaon and in bed with the Haryana government for as long as one can remember. So to think that they needed Vadra to get something done is a bit far-fetched, exactly what Mayor says. So I don't think in this instance you can actually draw a connection. So there must have been some other plan which probably got aborted. So we don't know much about that.
All right, to add then, Sunil Jain, to the two doubts that I've got from here, Bose and R. Jagannathan, to what extent, I beg your pardon, Mihir Sharma, to what extent are the suspicions that were raised by Mr. Kejriwal about this SEZ diminished by the fact that A, Vadra sold his 50% holding in 2009, and secondly by the fact that the Punjab and Haryana High Court, which had passed a verdict reversing the change in land use and passed at the same time strictures against the Haryana government and DLF, was itself stayed by the Supreme Court. To what extent are Mr. Kejriwal's suspicions diminished by these two events?
I think in this case they are completely diminished because, you know, as the note which Kejriwal has put out, it quotes from the judgment, and that judgment talks about how the Haryana government is favoring DLF all the time. So I think in this case Kejriwal has got it wrong.
So then, with specific reference to this case, would you say that there is here certainly no criminality, but also very probably no impropriety either?
I would think so.
Would you agree with that? No criminality, no impropriety in this instance?
No criminality and definitely no appearance even of impropriety.
In which case, Mr. Jagannathan, as things stand, if you look at the two potential examples of what journalistically I called possible smoking guns, we've dismissed the second one, the 50% involvement in an SEZ, but at least you and Mihir Sharma believe that the first one requires investigation, that there are grounds for suspicion, particularly in the story that was front paged by Business Standard today. Now, the question I want to ask is this: do these suspicions need to be cleared, or given that Robert Vadra is a private individual, not in government, can these suspicions be ignored?
There are two things. I think the first instance we all clearly, or at least I clearly think that needs to be probed very seriously, and he needs to answer several questions related to that, and even DLF. In the second instance, I am saying there is no apparent connection, but we still need to know why the deal was entered into in the first place. So we don't have an answer to that, but it doesn't look like a smoking gun at this point because it was aborted. The third point is why are we looking at it not as a private individual? I think if you look at the entire lot of central ministers who come to defend him, they are the one who said that this is not a effectively they are saying this is not a private individual. And in any case, in the UP election, you had Robert Vadra going on motorcycle campaigns in the political space. So how can he call himself a private citizen who does not need to be looked at all? It's not right.
So very, very quickly, in a nutshell, literally in one word, you're saying, in fact, there is an onus on Robert Vadra to clear the air. These suspicions cannot be ignored. A quick yes or no?
Absolutely.
A quick yes or no from you, Sunil Jain. Literally in a word, yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
He has to clear the suspicions, that's what you're saying?
Yes.
Mihir Sharma, would you agree?
No.
No, he doesn't have to clear them.
He's a private citizen.
So though he can afford to stay silent.
Yes.
Alright, we have a second split verdict, 2-1, that he does need to clear them, but importantly Mihir Sharma is saying he's a private person and he can keep silent if he wants. Well, now it's up to the audience to make up their minds. I've taken you through the details and the analysis about what are considered to be possible smoking guns. You know what the panel thinks, both about whether they are and whether the suspicions need to be cleared. It's now for you to make up your mind for yourselves. My thanks to all my guests for joining me, and if you haven't, thanks for watching. Goodbye, good night.